The watch was a Seiko. She noticed it because he wanted her to notice it. Held his wrist at the specific angle that men hold their wrists when they are wearing something they consider impressive and want the impression to travel across the distance between themselves and whoever they are talking to without requiring them to announce it directly. The watch face caught the bar's light. The bar's light was the warm amber of a venue that had been chosen for the reunion because it looked expensive on the invitation, but was, on arrival, simply a renovated function room in a hotel that had seen better decades. "You look exactly the same," he said. The tone of this contained its verdict. Exactly the same, in this specific delivery, from this specific person, in this specific context, meant you haven't changed. And not changing in the 10 years since university, in a room full of people who had upgraded their cars and their postcodes and their LinkedIn profiles, meant you have not advanced. You are the same person you were at 22, and at 22, I had already decided that person was not. His name was Connor Hale. He was 32, managing director of a mid-sized logistics consultancy in Bristol, and he wore this fact the way he wore the Seiko, with the confidence of someone who believes their level of achievement is more impressive than the context reveals it to be. He had the quality of a man for whom the 10 years since university had confirmed rather than complicated his self-assessment. A man who had started at 22 believing he was destined for something significant, and had arrived at 32 having achieved something modest, and had simply revised his definition of significant downward to accommodate the gap. She was wearing a navy dress, clean, simple, well-fitted, from a shop on the high street. She had chosen it specifically for its ordinariness, with the same precision she brought to most decisions that mattered. No jewelry except small gold studs at her ears, which were the kind of studs that anyone might wear and that revealed her hair was down. She was aware, like someone who had not tried very hard for this event, which was accurate, and also like someone for whom the event was the highest occasion in their current social calendar, which was not accurate at all. What would you do if someone who had told you 10 years ago that you were holding him back, who had said in the specific confident cruelty of a 22-year-old, who believes his trajectory is the only relevant one, that you were not the kind of person people like me end up with. If that person had cornered you at a bar at a reunion and was showing you his Seiko and implying with every calibrated syllable that your life had gone nowhere, what would you do? She smiled. It was a specific smile, the kind that does not reach the eyes because it is not coming from warmth, the kind that exists in the space between what a face is doing and what the person behind the face is thinking. And that communicates to anyone who is paying close enough attention that the two things are very different. Connor Hale was not paying close enough attention. He never had been. This was, in its way, the whole story. She glanced at the room, at the 112 people from their year at university, in their reunion badges and their event occasion clothing, and their specific varieties of the 10 years later version of themselves. She glanced at the bar's large windows, which faced the street outside. The street was quiet. It would not be quiet for much longer. She looked back at Connor. She said, "Tell me more about the consultancy." He told her. She listened with the focused, unhurried attention she brought to things she needed to understand completely before she addressed them. He was proud of the consultancy. He had reason to be, in the modest way of someone who has built something of genuine, if limited, consequence. The consultancy had 23 employees. It had contracts with several mid-sized clients in the logistics sector. It was profitable, he said, emphasizing profitable with the specific weight of someone for whom the word is doing a lot of personal work. Regional Manager of the Year, he said. 2 years running. Congratulations, she said. We're looking at expanding into the European market, he said. There are opportunities if you know the right people. He said this in the way of someone making a point about knowing the right people, while implying that the person they are talking to does not. Yes, she said. There are. He looked at her. The dress, the small gold studs, the absence of anything that would communicate what he was trying to establish the absence of. Are you still in, what was it, publishing? Something with books? Something with books, she said. Right. The word right absorbing her answer and filing it in the category his answer had already been placed in. Still in London? Mostly, she said. He took a sip of his drink. He looked at her with the expression of a man who is running out of questions because the questions keep producing answers that do not give him the contrast he is looking for. "Look," he said, and the look contained the specific, intimate cruelty of someone invoking a former relationship to establish a form of authority over the present moment. "I always thought you'd figure it out eventually. The direction thing. Not everyone has it. It's not a criticism. I'm not a criticism, doing significant work. People say not a criticism when they are criticizing and know it, and want to retain the plausible deniability of someone who was just making an observation. I figured some things out," she said. "That's great," he said. "Really? Good for you." He had the expression of someone who has not listened to what was said, but has generated a response that would be appropriate for most responses. "The consultancy took me a while too. The first few years after graduation, She had stopped listening. Not rudely. She maintained the outer expression of attention because she had been doing this her entire adult life. The specific discipline of maintaining the form of a thing while the interior is elsewhere. She was elsewhere in the particular way she sometimes went when something was very close to being finished. She was in the palace at Cornmere in the morning, in the room with the east-facing windows and the light that came in at the angle that her husband had learned she preferred and had arranged, without announcement, for the furniture to face. She was thinking about her husband's face when she had told him about this reunion, the specific contained way he had absorbed it, and then the specific, precise way he had said, "You should go. You have earned every moment of whatever that evening produces." And then, after a pause that was for the decision he had already made rather than for any uncertainty about it, "I'll come for you at 10, she had said. "You don't need to come," he had said. "I know." And the voice of a man for whom the knowing does not change the decision. Her name was not, and had not been for 4 years, the name she had given the reunion committee when she registered. She had given them the name on the alumni record, Sophie Caldwell. The name from university, from the relationship with Connor Hale, and everything before and around it. The name she had set down, carefully and deliberately, when she became Queen Sophia Marguerite of Cornmere. Cornmere was a small sovereign nation on the western coast of Central Europe, with a population of 2.5 million, a constitutional monarchy that had governed continuously since the 15th century, and a royal family whose personal and dynastic assets were managed by a team that included 24 lawyers, 3 investment banks, and an administrative office of 61. The country was known, in the corridors where it was discussed at all, for the specific, elegant stability of its institutions and for the particular quality of its head of state, King Edward, known as Edward in the English-language press that occasionally covered it, who had ruled since his father's abdication 7 years ago, and who was, in the consistent assessment of the diplomatic community that interacted with him, one of the most quietly formidable monarchs currently holding power in Europe. She had met him through a coincidence that she had never been able to decide was as coincidental as it appeared. She had been working at a publishing house in London, genuinely working. It was not a cover. She had found the position on her own and had done it well for 3 years. And the publishing house had been contracted to produce an English-language edition of a collection of Cornmere literature. And the Cornmere cultural attaché had come to discuss the project. And the cultural attaché had brought, without introduction or announcement, the king. He did not introduce himself as the king. He introduced himself as Edward, which was technically accurate. And he talked about the literature with the specific, detailed knowledge of someone who had grown up reading it and had opinions about it that were held with precision and revised when challenged. She challenged 2 of the opinions. He looked at her when she challenged them, looked with the complete, serious, unhurried attention of someone who is finding an unexpected thing and is not going to rush past the finding. And he said, "Why?" She told him why. They talked for 2 hours in the conference room of the publishing house while the cultural attaché waited in the reception area with the patient. Practiced composure of someone for whom this type of waiting is a professional function. He asked for her number. She gave it. She told herself it was professional. It was a project. There were editorial questions. But she gave it with the awareness that the giving was not primarily professional, and she was honest with herself about the awareness, because she was always honest with herself about things that mattered. The second time they met, he told her who he was, not at the beginning of the meeting, at the end, when everything else had been established, when the specific quality of what was between them had become undeniable and the information needed to be present. He said, I need to tell you something about my situation, and he told her, with the directness of a man who does not manage information as a form of power, who simply communicates what is true when it is relevant. She was quiet for a long moment after he finished. Then she said, "When were you going to tell me?" "Now," he said. "When it mattered enough to need to be said." "It mattered before now," she said. "Yes," he agreed. "I owe you that. I'm sorry for the timing." She looked at him. She was not naive. She had never been naive, and the specific complication of what he had just told her was large and real, and required thinking about carefully rather than romantically. She did the thinking. It took 3 days, and then she came back to him with the specific, certain quality of a woman who has made a decision she is fully examined and is ready to stand inside. They were married 2 years later in Cornmeer. The ceremony was broadcast to the nation on public television and attended by 43 representatives of sovereign and allied states. She wore a dress that took 6 months to design and 4 to make. The photographs were in every newspaper in Europe that covered royal events, which was most of them. None of this was known to Connor Hale, who had looked at her across a university lecture hall 10 years ago and decided she was not the kind of person people like him ended up with. None of it was known to the 112 people in the function room of this hotel in Bristol, who were on their second drinks and their third round of What Do You Do Now, managing the specific social arithmetic of 10 years, and who had moved where and by how much. She had come because she had wanted to, not for Connor, not specifically, not as a plan with Connor at its center. She had come because this was part of the life she had lived before Cornmeer, and she had wanted to stand in it one more time, in the ordinary clothes of an ordinary evening, and feel it around her, and take stock of the distance. She had told Edward this, and he had understood it in the specific, complete way he understood things that mattered to her, which was one of the qualities she loved most in him. He did not reduce her motivations to simpler things than they were. Connor said, "You look like you're somewhere else." She looked at him. "I'm here," she said. Right. He had been talking about the consultancy expansion. He had moved from the European market to his assessment of the opportunities in supply chain management, which was a subject he clearly found more interesting than most of his audience, and he had arrived at a point in the monologue where he wanted a response to something. "What do you think about the market?" "I think it's complicated," she said. He laughed the laugh of someone finding a simple answer characteristic. "It is, if you don't know it. If you know the right people." "You said that before," she said. He looked at her. "Did I?" "Yes," she said. "The right people." She considered him for a moment. The Seiko, the consultancy, the regional manager of the year, the way he was standing, slightly toward her, in the specific territorial way of someone who is used to being the largest presence in any conversation he is in and is managing the conversation accordingly. "Connor, do you remember what you said to me when we broke up?" He had the expression of someone who has expected a different topic and is recalibrating. "That was a long time ago." 10 years, she said. "You said I was not the kind of person people like you ended up with." He shifted his weight. "I was 22. "You were," she said, "and you said it with a great deal of confidence for 22. She paused. "I've thought about that sentence a few times over the years. Not obsessively, just occasionally, the way you think about things that were said with that kind of confidence. I always found it interesting. It was just, I know what it was," she said. "I'm not angry about it. I'm just curious about the confidence." "You were very sure." He looked at her. He looked at the navy dress and the small gold studs. He reached for the confidence that had characterized him at 22 and that still characterized him now. The specific confidence of a man who has organized his self-concept around being right and cannot easily access the version of himself that entertains being wrong. "Look," he said with the specific regretful warmth of someone being magnanimous, "I hope you found your thing. Not everyone does in their 20s. Some people take longer. There's no shame." She heard it before he stopped talking, a sound that was not the room's music, and not the conversation of 112 people, and not the city outside in its ordinary October evening configuration. A sound that was multiple, not one vehicle, not two, not the number that registers as ordinary traffic at this hour on this street. A sound that was building from the distance into the street outside, and that had the specific coordinated quality of a procession. Engines of significant size and number moving together with the unhurried certainty of things that have the road. Several people near the windows turned to look. Connor was still talking. No shame in finding your pace later. Some people peak in different stages. The first Maybach appeared at the corner. It was matte black, long, low, the specific profile of an S-Class Maybach Pullman, which is a car that costs enough that people who know what it costs do not typically encounter it in person, and it was followed by another, identical, and then a third, and a fourth, and they were still coming around the corner. 5, 6, 7, each one moving in the precise spacing of a trained convoy, each one with the specific weight and solidity of armored vehicles, which is a weight and solidity that you understand at a distance. Before you can name it, 15 of them. They filled the street outside the hotel's bar with the quiet, enormous authority of a thing that has taken up all available space and is not asking permission for this. Their windows were tinted to the specific, absolute black of windows that are not designed to show what is inside. Their engines, still running, produced a collective sound that moved through the floor of the hotel and into the function room. The function room had gone quiet. Not all at once. In the specific progressive way that a large group of people goes quiet when something is happening that is larger than the conversation they were having. Table by table, cluster by cluster. The voices trailing off as people turned, and the turning communicated to the people next to them that something required attention, until the room was not silent, but was doing something very close to it, with the remaining sound being the ambient noise of glasses and the music that no one had thought to turn off. Connor turned. He looked at the street. He looked at the 15 Maybachs. He looked back at Sophie with the expression of someone who has encountered a situation that does not map onto any category of experience he has. The door of the second vehicle opened. 2 men stepped out first. Dark suits, dark coats, the silver insignia of the Cornmere royal household at their lapels. Security detail. They moved to the positions they had been taking for 6 years with the ease of people for whom this is simply the function of their morning. They were followed by 2 more from the third vehicle and 2 from the fourth, and the street outside the hotel was now occupied not only by 15 Maybachs, but by a security presence that the hotel's door staff and the curious faces pressed to the window could not immediately categorize, but could immediately understand as serious. Then the door of the lead vehicle opened. King Edward of Cornmere stepped out onto the pavement of a street in Bristol on a Saturday evening in October, wearing a dark coat over a suit that cost more than most things in the surrounding postal district, and wearing it with the specific, completely unconscious ease of someone for whom the quality of clothing is simply not a thought that occurs. He was 40 years old. He had the face of a man who has been responsible for significant things for long enough that significance has become simply the condition of his days, which produces a particular, specific quality of presence. The quality of someone for whom drama is unnecessary because consequence is already real. He looked at the hotel entrance. He looked at it the way he looked at things he was about to walk through, with the calm, directed attention of someone who knows exactly what he is doing and is simply doing it. He walked toward the entrance. The function room had a clear line of sight from the bar to the door, and the door was glass. And through the glass door, every person in the room who was facing that direction could see the man walking toward the hotel with 5 members of his security detail and the 15 Maybachs on the street behind him, and the specific quality that certain people carry in the way they move through space. The hotel's door staff opened the door before he reached it. This was correct and automatic. He walked in. He walked through the hotel lobby into the function room, and through the function room's entrance, and the room. The 112 people in their reunion badges and their event occasion clothing, who had been to the same lectures and the same seminars and the same student, and as Sophie and as Con, who had been doing the arithmetic of 10 years comfortable, exceed the category of nostalgic. The room looked at him. He walked to her. He walked across the function room with the security detail at a distance that gave the space its correct proportion, close enough to be present, far enough not to constitute an intrusion. And he reached the bar, and he reached her, and he stopped. He looked at her. In the specific, private way he looked at her when they were in rooms full of other people, and he was making the room disappear with the direction of his attention. He took her right hand in both of his, and he brought it to his lips. He kissed her hand, crown bow and hand kiss. The Cornmere formal greeting between a sovereign and his consort in public contexts. Every person in the room who knew the protocol understood what they were watching. Every person who did not know the protocol understood, from the quality of it, that what they were watching was significant. The room was entirely silent. Connor Hale, standing at the bar with his Seco and his consultancy and his Regional Manager of the Year plaque somewhere in an office in Bristol, was looking at the man who had just kissed Sophie Caldwell's hand with the expression of a man who has been given, in a single moment, every piece of information he needs about the 10 years between a university lecture hall and a hotel function room, and who is in the process of integrating this information and finding the integration very difficult. She looked at Edward. He raised his eyes from her hand and looked back at her with the warm, contained, private quality of a man in a public function, performing the public part while maintaining the private part, because after 4 years of marriage, they had both become expert at the distinction. "I said 10, she said. "I was ready early," he said. She almost smiled. "Were you?" "The drive was shorter than expected," he said. This was not true. He had left early because he had wanted to. She knew this, and he knew she knew it, and neither of them said it directly, which was the fluent, specific shorthand of two people who communicate efficiently. She turned. She looked at the room. She looked at 112 people who had known her as Sophie Caldwell in a lecture hall 10 years ago, and were now looking at her with the specific recalibrating expression of people who are revising everything they have filed about a person in a single, unplanned moment. She looked at Connor Hale. He said, "Who?" "My husband," she said. "King Edward of Cornmere." She said it in the level, even voice she used for factual statements that needed to be received as factual rather than dramatic. "We've been married 4 years. Connor looked at her husband. He looked at the security detail. He looked at the 15 Maybachs visible through the window. He looked at Sophie, at the navy dress, the small gold studs, the ordinary appearance of a woman at a reunion, and something was happening in his face that was the specific, progressive unraveling of a person's self-concept, when the premise on which it is built is revealed to be fundamentally incorrect. "You're," he said. "The Queen of Cornmere," she said. "Yes." A woman near the bar said, "Oh my God." It was said with the specific, involuntary quality of something that bypasses social editing. Connor's mouth opened. It did not immediately produce a sentence. She continued. She did not raise her voice. She did not perform the speech. She simply said what was true. "The consultancy you work, Meridian Logistics Solution. It was acquired 3 years ago by an infrastructure holding group. The infrastructure holding group is managed through a trust instrument established by the Cornmere Crown Foundation." She paused. "I am the beneficial owner of the trust. Through the foundation's administrative structure, I have governance rights over the appointments of senior management in the trust's portfolio companies, including managing director positions." Connor said, "That's not. It's documented," she said. "If you'd like the documentation, my legal office will provide it before Monday." She looked at him with the level, complete, unhurried attention she had been giving him all evening. "You told me 10 years ago that I was not the kind of person people like you end up." "I've thought about that sentence occasionally," as I said. "What I've concluded is that it was accurate. You were right. I am not the kind of person people like you end up with. And I think it would be better for everyone if people like you no longer worked for people like me." The sentence landed in the silence of the function room with the specific quality of something that has been dropped from a height. Not loud, simply complete, with the sound of weight arriving at the floor. Connor Hale opened his mouth. He closed it. He opened it again and said, "You can't just..." "I can," she said. "The administrative action will be processed through the normal channels. You'll receive notification on Monday." She looked at him for one more moment, not with anger, not with triumph, with the level, complete attention of someone who has seen a thing clearly and is finished looking at it. "Enjoy the reunion, Connor." She turned to Edward. He offered his arm. She took it. They walked across the function room, through the 112 people in their reunion badges, through the amber light, through the specific, concentrated silence of a room that has been given more to process than it expected to process this evening, and through the door. The hotel lobby, the hotel entrance, the night air, which was the cold October air of Bristol at 10 in the evening, with the smell of the city and the distant traffic and the very faint trace of the river. The 15 Maybachs on the street, the security detail at their positions, the specific, quiet authority of a convoy that has been waiting and is now prepared to move. The door of the lead vehicle was held open. She got in. Edward got in beside her. The door closed. The interior was warm, and the leather was the specific deep navy of Cornmere's diplomatic vehicles. and the privacy screen was closed between them and the driver, because this was one of the things Edward had insisted on when the vehicle specification was first discussed. The privacy screen. She looked at the street through the window as the convoy began to move. The hotel's windows were visible for a moment, the amber light of the function room, the shapes of people visible through the glass, the specific suspended quality of a room that is still absorbing something. She looked forward. Edward was looking at, not with the public quality of the formal greeting, with the private quality, the specific, warm, completely attentive look of a man who has loved someone for 4 years and finds the looking still interesting. "How was it?" he said. She considered the question. "Instructive," she said. He almost smiled. "In what direction?" She thought about it. "The direction I expected," she said. "Which is the direction that was worth going in to confirm." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "The dress." She looked down at the navy dress. "I liked it." "I know," he said. "You chose it. That was sufficient." She looked at him. 4 years of mornings and state dinners, and the difficult, consequential work of governing a country alongside someone who takes the difficulty seriously and the consequence honestly, and the partnership, the specific, daily, irreplaceable partnership of two people who have decided to be each other's primary reality as the most important of all the serious things. She looked at him with all of this present, and she thought about the lecture hall 10 years ago, and Connor Hale's 22-year-old confidence, and the sentence about the kind of person people like him end up with. And she found that the sentence had completely, finally, and without residue, run out of the small amount of space she had given it. It was gone. It had been replaced by something that did not need to announce itself, or defend itself, or demonstrate its accuracy to anyone. It simply was what it was, in the backseat of a Corranmere Royal Household Maybach on a Saturday evening in October, going home. True power, she had learned, not as a principle, but as something that had been lived and confirmed, and was now simply permanent knowledge, does not need to arrive in a navy dress announcing itself. It does not need to explain the dress or the studs or the absence of visible jewelry. It does not need to produce its credentials at the bar of a reunion event, or demonstrate, through any external signal, what it is. It simply waits. It waits with the patience of someone who knows that the world will eventually arrange itself around the truth, rather than around the impressions people have constructed in the truth's absence. And when the world does, when 15 Maybachs pull up to a hotel in Bristol on a Saturday evening, because a king came early because he wanted to, the arrangement is complete and permanent, and requires no further maintenance. Did Connor Hale get exactly what he earned? Every syllable of it. The employment notice and the silence in the room and the 10 years of certainty that collapsed in the time it takes a king to cross a function room. If you felt the cold, specific satisfaction of watching someone who told a woman she wasn't good enough discover precisely how good enough she was, then smash that like button right now. Share this with someone who needs it today. And subscribe to this channel, because the stories of patience rewarded and confidence correctly placed, and the specific perfect karma of a 15-car royal escort arriving for a woman in a navy dress from the high street never stop. And every single one of them is worth every second of the wait.